And so I'll tell you about an adventure I've been on this year and what it hopefully can teach you about advertising and marketing effectiveness, which I hope is genuinely useful and also genuinely different from perhaps what you've thought before. So he's been mentioned a couple of times today, old smarty. So I don't know Brent that much until recently. So he's the CMO at IAG. And we kind of bumped into each other at events like this for the last couple of years. So I said, well, dinner. And, well, we didn't have dinner. We went and got absolutely annihilated in a bar in Sydney and didn't bother with food. But I have to be honest, I didn't learn a single thing about marketing that I didn't already know before I met him that night from a really good conversation. And he would say exactly the same thing, I'm sure, about me. And that's not a bad thing. It's an interesting thing in the sense that I think people that are relatively senior and involved in marketing are suddenly starting to find that everyone is saying and thinking the same things. And that's never happened before, yeah? So if you go back 10 years, if I'd have met someone like him and he'd have met someone like me, we'd have been like, oh, fuck, that's really interesting. You know what I mean? Oh, I didn't know that. Whoa, what the fuck, what's that all about? And suddenly things, I think, are starting to lock together in a way that they haven't locked together before. And the analogy I would use, it's kind of like biology. When I was a high school student, for some fucking strange reason, I studied biology to get to university. I've never studied it since. And I hate biology. And I really crammed hard because I wanted to go to a good uni. And about a week before my exam, my A-level exam, it finally just all suddenly connected together. Like blood flow and the lymph system and the vena cava and fuck knows what these things mean. But just for about a week before my exam, it all went, oh, the human body, fuck that, yeah, that connects to that, bang. And then it was gone, right? It's kind of how it feels this year in marketing. Here and elsewhere around the world, we are starting to, in a very interesting way, join the dots. And so what I'd like to do is talk about that for this session. It's not some like magician's club or something. Tell you what this stuff is that me and Smarty both basically already knew, yeah? In case you don't know it, so you can go and have those same experiences. And you're going to hear this phrase a lot, which is trotted out more and more, which is evidence-based. Evidence-based marketing, right? Which prompts the question, what other fucking base would you be using for your marketing, yeah? But in the past, we've used myth and magical thinking and hunches and everything else for marketing, and we haven't relied on evidence. And I think what you're seeing is the evidence and the analysis and the thinking is finally coming together, and there isn't really anyone disagreeing with this shit, just refining it a little bit. So this all ties in nicely with what happened with me. So I was in New York about a year ago, and I met a delightful woman, Tracy, who is the CEO and president of the Effies. Some of you will know the Effies in the room, some of you won't. The Effies are super important because they are the ultimate award for marketing, except for the one that we're going to do tonight, okay? And the Effies have been around for 50 years, which is a long time in marketing. They started in 1968 in America. We've had them for about 12, 13 years here, thanks to Comms Council. And you have to see an Effie submission to realize why it's a big deal. An Effie submission is usually 15 to 20 pages long. It's got to have the data, it's got to have the strategy, it's got to have the execution, it's got to have everything, yeah? And my favorite bit of an Effie submission is there's a paragraph at the end that says, explain why it wasn't other exogenous factors, other shit, that explains this success, which is extraordinarily difficult to do. So the Effies are super important, and our level of Effie, as you're about to see in a minute, is getting better and better each year. So anyway, that's a long time. And I met Tracy, and she said, look, we've got this anniversary coming up. Would you like to do something with us? I'm like, fuck yeah, it's the Effies, man. I mean, I love the Effies. So I agreed, partly because I was shit-faced and partly because it was just an amazing opportunity to analyze every single Effie submission in the history of the Effies to look at patterns and lessons and learnings. Now, it turns out some of them, and we're talking about the 70s and 80s, are just like bits of paper with shit written on them. Like, you don't even know what they are, right? But we got a good caseload of data, almost 6,000 submissions, which is, it's a big N, right? Going back about 12, 13 years, mostly America, but as you'll see, a bit of Oz as well. And what we did at Melbourne Business School over a period of about 8 or 9 weeks of solid crunching is we coded every single paper and put it into essentially a giant spreadsheet to see what it told us about marketing, and specifically about effectiveness, okay? So to be clear, what I'm about to show you is based upon the biggest brands in the world doing the biggest campaigns. And if you don't know this about Effies, I just have to explain. So you submit, you might get a bronze Effie, which is first of all, you usually get nothing. Most of you might get 70 or 80 submissions here in Oz in a typical year. 50 odd of those submissions get Zippo because they're good but not that good. They might get shortlisted, that's okay. You might get a bronze, great, a silver, very good, a gold, amazing, and then the grand Effie, which is only one campaign, which was won by Clems and Great Northern a couple of nights ago. The point is, we've turned that into a score, okay? What we're going to call an Effie score. So we've looked at all of these 6,000 campaigns and how effective were they based on basically how well judged were they by the Effie panel that particular year. And then we've looked at the correlation between that Effie score and whether they made any money. And the good news is there is a strong correlation. You can make lots of money without winning an Effie, but it turns out it's magnitudes better and more likely that if you have a strong Effie score, you will generate far more long and short-term money, as you'll see. Okay? So I will keep showing you hypotheses we wanted to test, and we will test it against the Effie score, which in itself is a test of, did it work, did it make money, okay? And let's see what it tells us about marketing and this evidence-based movement which is starting to emerge, okay? All right, let's start with the big one, which is research. We just heard about it from an excellent panel. The degree to which research, metrics, etc., do or don't drive effectiveness across our nearly 6,000 cases. So what you're seeing here on the y-axis, just to be clear for the first one, what you're seeing here is that Effie score. So on average, how did it rate? And then we coded every single one of the submissions based on how much research was in the submission. 0. So it didn't even talk about data or research. Low to average. It has an average amount in the submission or a higher than average level of literally how many words did they spend talking about the research and insights and metrics. Okay? Here's what we see. You ready? So does effectiveness go up as research goes up? What is the relationship between the two? Now, it doesn't really matter that's 0.28. It's all relative. What's interesting is, and some of this shit genuinely surprised me, right? Again, you can have effectiveness without actually having a big research base, but low to average levels of research increases your effectiveness by approximately 50%. Thank fuck for that, right? But equally interestingly, at a certain point, over-researching something, back to the Bezos quote from doing 70% and not anymore, it's not going to hurt you, but in reality, it doesn't do much more good. So that nice combination of qual and quant underpinning your campaign does increase your effectiveness substantially. Let's move to strategic objectives. So I'll be clear about these before we get going, because when I read about 2,500 of these myself, right? The thing that sucks most in all Effie submissions, according to me, with my academic, overly accurate and anal hat on, is how little and how few of these submissions have proper objectives. So objectives, at least when we teach it to MBA students, are the signal of strategy, yeah? And let me be clear what that looks like, at least in theory and very occasionally in practice. So upstairs, you have a series of all white men, if you not noticed, they're all white and they're all men, who are setting the objectives, not changing, who are setting all the objectives in the boardroom, yeah? They have what I would call business aspirations. And they look a little bit vague, but they're not, okay? And they could be something like this: reverse our sales decline, become the #1 brand, yeah? Get past $100 million in revenue. And they do come out of a strategic place, but they're usually expressed like this, yeah? That's above our pay grade, frankly, and it's passed down to us on high. Now, beneath us, not in terms of honor and everything, but in terms of process, are tactical goals. Achieve 400,000 social mentions, stuff like that, yeah? Tactically associated goals. That's not a strategic objective either. In the middle is what we'd be looking for, and a strategic objective would be something like this. And we see these, I would say 1 out of 10 submissions as a decent set of objectives. And I tell my MBAs, if you don't write them like this, you haven't got a fucking clue what you're doing. You're not properly trained, yeah? Because there's a couple of ways to spot properly trained marketers. Confidence level in the quant research, that's always like, who trained you? Where'd you come from, right? In a sea of shit, how come you're doing confidence levels? Who taught you how to do that? And another one is proper strategic objectives, yeah? And they look like this, smart objectives, yeah? I mean, I've made this one up, but increase consideration from 12 to 15% to 25% by December 29 among 18 to 24-year-olds. To create one of those means you've done all kinds of other shit to get there, and now we've got a benchmark, yeah? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about strategic objectives. So, do more objectives, deliver more effectiveness. And I'm a one-objective guy. Any client that is in the room that's ever worked with me will know I like a big, hairy objective that we get done in a year, and then we'll do another one, right? I really have done that my whole career, which turns out not to be the right thing. So here's what happens. It's dead interesting, right? So one objective, as you can see, is actually very suboptimal. 2 to 3 appears to be the magic number, and then it keeps tailing down to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way down on that trajectory there, right? So the first point is my approach is actually wrong. Trying to focus everyone on a single objective that we get done, at least according to this data, you'd be better off having 2 or 3. Yeah? And when I've read more about this since I discovered this in the strategy literature, yeah, the best work on this that's published in Sloan Management Review for strategic objectives says, massive survey, 2 to 3 strategic objectives appears from a giant set to have the most link to effectiveness. Now, it varies by circumstance, but what's the magic number? If strategy is sacrifice, as our previous panel mentioned, how much sacrificing should you do? If you have 6, 7, 8 strategic objectives, they're not objectives, right? They're just dreams that will never come true. But if you have just one, you're probably limiting yourself as well, yeah? 2 or 3, consideration, awareness, whatever it might be, appears to be the magic number. And one of the best cases of all time, anywhere in the world, came out of Lion for Dare, which won the Grand Effie a couple of years ago. It is a world beater, in my opinion. It's a good example, right? The senior management at Lion said, we want to become the market leader in iced coffee and then grow share against all the other non-alcoholic beverages. That was basically it. And the team at Dare had 2 well-written strategic objectives. Increase brand awareness from 70 to 80%. And the one I like the best, increase consideration from 15 to 65% over a 5-year period. Now, you have to understand objectives and have set them and failed to meet them. I work for a very famous bank here, and we got a 10% increase in consideration in a year, and we had a party, right? They did it fucking 5 years running, right? And every year you do it, it gets harder the next year. So that is some Herculean achievement. And then there was obviously then a bunch of tactical stuff as well. So you get the idea. Here's where I start to get a little bit optimistic, right? And we've talked about this, if you were here this morning, if you remember the dim early morning session, we talked about Australia used to be shit house at marketing because we didn't have to be good at marketing. My point to you is Coles and Woolies in about 1998 were the worst fucking supermarkets in the developed world, yeah? They were also the most profitable by square foot. So it's not that they were run by dumbos, it was like they didn't have to care because you had no fucking choice, yeah? That's what oligopolies do. You don't build brands, you don't do innovation because you don't have to. Why bother? Just make money. There's nowhere else to go, right? What happened with international competition in this decade you've all lived through is we got our asses kicked. Aldi came in, Costco came in, Topshop came in, Zara came in, and they couldn't fucking believe how stupid we were and how easy it was to make money. Seriously, that was the conversation, right? And now the good news is we're getting better. So if you look at how many objectives we currently have per submission for the Effies, we actually are matching the Americans, and it's about the right number. So I think, as you'll see as we go through this, there's a couple of points where you go, actually, the Australian submissions, big campaigns are really shaping up nicely. This is one of them. Okay, the big one. You ready? We keep fucking talking about it, okay? And you sort of should be aware of it now, but I want to talk about it a bit more and explain it one last time. You ready? This is the shits, yeah? This is it for your whole career. You might only be 28. This will be it for your 30 years. You ready? This is super important shit because it's true and it's really important. Okay, so these two old fuckers, they were old when I was studying marketing in the 80s. That's how fucking old they are, right? Les must be 90, right? So Pete and Les are both account planners at the two best agencies in the UK. And they also have been running the FEs and the judging of the FEs in the UK now for about 15, 20 years. They've been doing a much better job than what I'm doing on this data, analyzing the British FEs. And their data, particularly because Pete is a statistical genius, their data is extraordinarily important. And they've become mega stars in the last 6 months, right? Much to their own discomfort. And if you want to read their work, probably the long and the short of it's the best book. Right. What is in this magical piece of research? Just one very famous chart, which I will slightly change so it makes more sense. Ready? So, what do we all want in the room? We want that. We want growth. Yeah? We all lust after that. Growth happens over time. And what Pete and Les have observed is there are two different paths to growth. The first path, which they call sales activation, but we could call performance marketing, does this. Okay? And the definition of performance marketing is I put my foot on the pedal, sales go up. The minute I take my foot off the pedal, sales return back to their previous level. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's a very fucking good thing. I invest some money, sales go up, I take a return. Yeah? But it returns back to the pre-acceleration level at the end. Okay? As you can see. The other path to growth that they observe is a slower, more incremental path, which they term, I think correctly, brand building. Okay? Now, the first thing to say is this isn't brand building good, sales activation bad. The book is called The Long and the Short of It. Okay? The tyranny of the or needs to be removed. You want both here. Let's be very clear. Yeah? You want both. But you can see that blue line, yeah? It's incremental, it's slower, but ultimately, it's going to deliver more, okay? Now, why is everyone, it's not fucking rocket science, is it? Why is no one fucking doing this in the whole of Australia? Because nobody is, trust me, yeah? No one's anywhere near the right balance of long and short, they're mostly short. It's because everyone's operating in a sub-12, usually sub-6-month window, yeah? If you look at that window purely in a 6-month or pre-12-month level, and you were offered those two paths, lots of investment in short-term activation or longer-term investment in brand building, you'd be a nutter to invest in brand building, right? It doesn't make sense. The ROI, which is a dumb fucking metric, by the way, the ROI would tell you, put your money into the short term. That's the trap we've caught ourselves in. It's got fuck all to do with CMO tenure, which is the world's biggest fucking cliche, right? CMO tenure, CMO tenure. What a lot of balls. This is the answer. No one's seeing, long term is not 5 one-year periods joined together. It's a 5-year window. Let's be very clear what this tells us. This tells us that over a 3 or 4 year period, if you were to put 50 or 60% of your budget into long-term brand building, amortize that across those 4 or 5 years, you would make more fucking money, period. Yeah? The reason I'm telling you to build brand and put more money into it isn't because it's cool or trendy. It will make you more money than the short-term dumb ROI stuff that everyone does again and again and again and again. And again, I'm not saying don't do the short-term stuff. I'm saying get it in the right proportion. The long feeds the short backs up the long, okay? Or to put it in a more pleasant way, your brand is a tree. You should be investing money in the long term by watering it and picking the fruit in the short term. But what's been happening here in Australia, like everywhere else, is our watering is being reduced more and more, and we're trying to pick more and more short-term fruit. And we're heading into a difficult place as a result. So, is long better than short? Does the data from the FEs support Field and Burnett's British sample? So, here's the answer. Yes, it does. Thank fuck for that as well. And again, with this much data, getting these kind of lines to be statistically significant is quite impressive, I must say. It means there's something there. So what you see here is, as we move to 12-month campaigns that set a minimum of more than 12 months for their objectives to come true, we observe a significantly better level of effectiveness, and we know that links better with performance. But I remind you again, I'm not really interested in long better than short for reasons we'll get to in a minute. I love short. I just want it to be in the right proportion to long, and that's the whole point of this work. When we did the FEs in America early this year in New York, Hugh Johnston, got up before me to talk. He's the CFO at PepsiCo. And I thought, as you've probably done today at some point, maybe with me, fuck, this is going to be boring, yeah? He's about 60. He's a fucking CFO. I'm like, oh, my God. But I couldn't go outside and have a cigarette because I'm on next. So I had to sit down like, fuck, I haven't got my phone. It was the best talk I've seen in about 8 years, right? Because basically, Johnson has lived through PepsiCo for 25 years and has seen everything. And he just nailed everything just beautifully. And my favorite quote from him, any idiot can do short-term, any idiot can do long-term. The trick is to do both. There is so much wisdom in this statement, as you'll see. Some of you like long-term, what we used to call above-the-line brand building. Yeah? It's not enough. Some of you like short-term performance marketing. It's not enough. We need to pull it all back together again. So now we're going to get to the nux of it. You ready? I think something that no one else thinks, okay? And I'm pretty fucking sure I'm right. I'm not certain, pretty fucking sure I'm right. Target marketing. And it's linked to that other stuff. So, if you look at the history of Effie's, and you go back 2011 or earlier, and you look at whether the submissions were about targeting everyone, mass marketing, black, or going after target segment, 18 to 24-year-old whatevers, almost all of it, as you can see, was target segmentation. We all grew up with Phil Kotler. We all grew up with STP, yeah? And all the submissions 2011 and back demonstrate that. But in the last decade, something really interesting happens. And what happens is this. Watch how the submissions start to change in their targets. That black bar is mass marketing, which was meant to be dead, yeah? Which was meant to be inefficient. Nearly half the campaigns being submitted for the big prizes have been going after everyone in the category and saying, fuck targeting and segmentation, we'll just go after everyone in the category. And then up in the bronze color there, that's doing a bit of mass marketing and a bit of target marketing as well, long and short. So what you're seeing here is the influence of the two great works of the last decade of marketing. This is the influence of how brands grow by Professor Byron Sharp. Byron Sharp. The Dark Lord of Penetration believes in mass marketing, yeah? Hence the Dark Lord of Penetration title. He wants to get everyone in the market to buy the product. He has resurrected mass marketing pretty much single-handedly. The bronze is the long and the short of it, as you'll see. The long and the short, yeah? So we're getting a much more complex picture. So, does targeting beat mass marketing? It's meant to, because in all the textbooks, mass marketing, stupid, old guys with beards doesn't work. Target segmentation, more effective, yada, yada, yada. So, target segments versus mass marketing. Now, the first thing is, target segments do all right. That's a pretty good score. Campaigns that have a very clear one or more target segments do all right. But Sharp is correct. Let's be very clear. Mass marketing isn't just not dead. It's actually, pound for pound, more effective than targeting particular segments. That's fucking shocking unless you're an Ehrenberg Bass fan, right? Now, again, I don't want you to look at it as being mass marketing beats targeting. It's, again, the tyranny of the or. I want you to look at both of those bars as being attractive, and I'll explain why. This is the big point. And we're not quite there yet with data, but we're getting pretty close. If you look at these two lines that Field and Burnett have discovered, there's something else going on. So, the short-term activation. Field's own research says if you look at targeting existing customers, targeting new customer segments, or targeting everyone in the market, when you go for short-term performance marketing, you know what? You should go after existing customers and existing customer segments. So segmentation and targeting still have a place, according to this chart. They're more effective than going after everyone. But when you go for brand building, when you're supposedly putting your 60% into the branded stuff, Sharp's point becomes evident. You actually get the best return by going after existing segments, new customers, everyone in the category, sophisticated mass marketing. So here we glimpse an interesting insight. You want to target, for the long of it, for brand building, you want to go after everyone in the category. You want to drop a nuclear fucking explosion on everyone out there in your category. But on top of that, don't forget, your segments and your particular targets for the short-term performance marketing still must be maintained. And we're still, even Field and Burnett, we're still prevaricating, going, ooh, segmentation, ooh, mass marketing. The answer is both. On Monday, we published, I didn't, but the Communications Council published an analysis of the last 2 years of Australian FE submissions, showing again, as you can see, broad targets deliver more new customers and stronger profit growth. Sort of. But look at that box there. See? It's the same theory played out here. For short-term performance marketing, I'd still be targeting segments. What they're picking up is when you do both, you get a better return. And I believe that, and I think it's the way forward. Now, this isn't a secret to everyone. If I get you to think about Dove, you think, oh, that's all emotional, it's all about purpose-driven. It was, and it wasn't. So Dove have submitted for more FEs in America over the last 10 years than everyone else. And we all think about the campaign for Real Beauty. That was all about the master brand. It was all about making the point of view, the positioning famous. It was about emotion, and it was about cultural resonance, right? It was only about 65% of their budget. The other 35% went on very standard, targeted, product-based communication, all about targeting particular segments, product persuasion, salience, and mental availability. So Dove have been doing this all along, yeah? An emotional mass campaign and target segments with much more product persuasive stuff. And interestingly, at one point, they said this master brand stuff, it's not really worth it anymore. The short-term stuff's working fine for us. And sales started to decline. And they talked to Nielsen, who said to them, every dollar you spend on long-term emotional brand buildings, delivering you more than $4 in return. So it doesn't look like it's working, because it has no ROI, except when you drop that big nuclear explosion, your short-term stuff works much better. I work with a global sporting company based in Portland, Oregon. And for 2 years, they've been doing long and short principles beautifully, and then they've made, I think, an almighty mistake, which is they've gone, look, our short-term stuff is going so great, we don't need the long anymore. And they're missing the point. The long is helping to drive the short, and you should keep your long budget because it's driving your short. So, I believe in two-speed brand plans. What the fuck does that mean? I think it's the future, yeah? No more short, no more long. 2 speeds is the way to build brands properly in the era of the long and the short of it. And I got very excited and I designed a logo for the 2-speed brand plan. And what are you laughing at? And I showed it to the woman that I work with on the mini MBA, and I said, look at this, I fucking designed this logo myself. And she went, what is it? What is it? Does the rabbit have cancer? I'm like, what? So she said, you have to get a professional. So I got a professional. So my point is, this is the future, yeah? This is how we're doing it, and this is how you should do it. I promise you it's true, and I'm promising you it's going to work. So a decent brand plan should start, as we've seen, with research, diagnosis, and segmentation. At that point, however, we're going to split the brand plan down the middle. And you're going to go on a mass marketing journey. Everyone in the category is now going to be targeted with a brand position, brand codes, okay? And we're going to have objectives based off the brand tracker that have got nothing to do with dollars, but are based off the brand tracking objectives you're setting from your brand health metrics. And then a bunch of tactics which follow from that. And that should be, if you follow Field and Minette, some fraction of 60%, depending on what category you're in. Then, the second chapter is you're going to then pull out different target segments. You're going to have a product position, an old-fashioned product positioning statement. You're going to then have a series of product objectives and then segment-specific tactics for that particular arm. And you're going to have a lot of those fuckers, depending on how big you are, depending on how many different segments you're going after, they're going to play out, right? Because they're the short term. Now, here's the challenge I see with a couple of clients I do this with now. You've got to be what I call dirty fingernail about this, yeah? That shit on the left, that's commercial shit. We're in it to make as much fucking money as possible this year so we can fund the long term on the other side. There's a schizophrenia here that you have to master. Long-term, emotional brand building, 4, 5, 6 years, codified. Short-term, super fucking commercial, we're in it to make as much money as we can each year, entrepreneurial, yeah? You got to master both, and the two wheels start to feed each other. And the key point is you need a zero-based budget at the bottom, because it's no good dividing this money up and not having it again, united at the bottom into a single brand plan. This, if I could stake my career on something, is how we're going to build brands for the next 20 years. Yeah? It's the only way you can get all the shit we've talked about. Okay, media versus creative. Again, from 2010 backwards, if you look at all the submissions for an Effie, there's two kinds. There's either just talk about the creative, or they talk about the creative and the media. But again, in the last decade, a new pattern has emerged. And you'll recognize it from your own experiences here in Australia. A new flavor, a submission that doesn't talk about the creative much, and mostly talks about the channels through which the creative has been delivered. It has begun to fade out. But you know this decade, we were more interested in the fucking pipe than we were what we were sending down the pipe, right? Programmatic, digital versus traditional, right? The media wars, the channel wars. Well, you see it played out here, yeah? David Abbott is one of the great creatives of all time. Sadly passed away not that long ago, but he lived long enough to see this era where creative work from agencies was less important than when and how it was delivered. And he came up with, for me, the great quote of the 21st century when it comes to marketing and creativity and this obsession with media, which isn't that fucking important, yeah? Abbott said, shit that arrives at the speed of light is still shit, yeah? What's the fucking work, right? We're putting it on Facebook. We're not putting it on TV. What's the work? Is the work any good? Who's making the ads? Is the agency any good, right? Is the creative any good? Nielsen did a piece of work last year looking at what drives effectiveness according to them, yeah? And a lot of media factors are important. Targeting, 9%. Recency, so when you deliver the ad versus purchase, 5%. Reach, 22%. Context, media context in which the ad is presented, only 2%. And the brand itself, the size and scale of the brand, 15%. Guess what the biggest factor according to Nielsen was, who basically work in media, in driving effectiveness? Whether your ad's any fucking good. Yeah? Now that shouldn't shock us, but it does shock us. Because I sit through conferences where all we fucking talk about is channels and media. What about the work, right? Is it any good? Is it shit or is it good? Ooh, differentiation, okay? Quick journey through differentiation. You ready? For you marketing historians. Along comes Rossa Reeves in 1961, Ted Bates, and says basically differentiation is a unique selling proposition. The chocolate that melts in your mouth and not in your hand. Unique to you and no one else can claim it. That's how differentiation began. Ritson Trout turned up in the 70s and invented positioning. Remember what positioning was? Originally, I own a word in your head. FedEx owns overnight. We own that word. It's not unique to us, but we own that word in the mind of the prospect. Now, both of these theories, I don't think they were true in the 60s and 70s. They're certainly not fucking true now. Anyone that's looked at brand tracking data knows there's nothing fucking unique out there, and you can't own an attribute. It's not physically possible. So they're kind of bullshit, right? The problem is, though, the Dark Lord's come along and said, look, basically, differentiation doesn't exist. I mean, he does think it exists, but basically, this is literally what he said to me. I believe differentiation exists. Brands have different names. They're available in my size, and I know where the shop is. That's his fucking boring Kiwi definition of differentiation, right? That's it. Meanwhile, we've got Simon Sinek and a whole army of idiots over here talking about brand purpose, yeah? Oh, come on. Anyone who follows Simon Sinek needs to really look at some data, okay? If you're a young marketer, here's where you're trapped. You're trapped between, I don't care what I'm buying, it's why they're making it. I went into the shop to buy some cornflakes, but I bought a trombone because it was made with purpose. That's what fucking Sinek's saying. It's true. We don't care what you're making. Why are you making it, right? So I'm trapped between Simon Sinek and his trombones and Byron Sharp and his monochrome vision of differentiation, and it's not right. Neither of them are right. Here's where we should be. Sharp's mostly right as usual, yeah? We have overstated differentiation. When you look at the data, he's right, it's not that strong. But relative differentiation, you don't own anything, but you have stronger associations. They're relative to each other, the 3 or 4 associations in your brand positioning, and crucially, they're relative to salience. This is the key lesson of good brand evidence-based research, which I'll get to in a minute. 80% of your job, as you'll see, is salience. It's got nothing to do with differentiation. Now, I think it's important but Sharp is mostly right here. You think your brands are different because you work at them 8 hours a day. They don't fucking care out there, and they perceive you to be mostly the same. So, does differentiation pay? We rated the attempts at differentiation from not bothering to somewhat to high levels of attempting to say we are different, and this is what we found. Yeah, it does still exist. Trust me, I'm relatively rare in believing in differentiation. Most marketing experts now say it doesn't matter and it doesn't exist. It does exist and it's important. It's just not as dominant and as strong as we once thought. And this is, again, very good news. When we compare the Australian submissions versus the American submissions, we're actually more differentiated now in our approaches than the Americans. Now, I don't have data from 15 years ago from Australia, but I'll bet you my last dollar, if I did, I'll bet you we were way lower in the old days. We've learned to be more competitive, and actually these days our goal of differentiation, spurned by more competition, is much greater than it used to be. So there is optimism in the quality of Australian marketing. Okay, this is my main message and why I came today to talk to you. Codification, you ready? Shit hot fucking important stuff this. Don't miss it. Where are you going? You can't go now. This is the most important bit. Honestly, come on, get back. Get back. No. All right, fine. You're out of my circle of trust. So there are 2 Ds in marketing. You ready? Differentiation, how much I'm perceived to be different from another brand in the market. Distinctiveness, it's got nothing to do with other brands. Take them out of the occasion. How much do you look like yourself in front of the customer? How much do you come to mind when they think about the category and the queue? Yeah? Are you distinctive? Do you come to mind in buying situations? My message to all of you, and it's taken me a long time to get there, is you see the distinctiveness thing on the right? That's 80% of your job. Doesn't matter what category you're in. 80% of the job. Let me tell you what the first rule of branding is. First, they must fucking know that it's me. First, you must know that it's me. Now, how you perceive me and all that stuff? Sure, 20%. But first, you must know that it's me. Constantly, you must know that it's me. And because we've forgotten that, we've spent too much time on brand image and differentiation, and we don't even think about distinctiveness. So, the 2 great works of brand management in my lifetime are Kevin Keller's marketing science paper, CBBE, don't worry about it, and Sharp's How Brands Grow. What fascinates me is Keller gives, if you look at his triangle, about 10% of the value of the brand concept to salience, and Sharp gives pretty much 90%. Yeah? That's how much we've changed based on the evidence over the last 15 years. So, why is this so important? And it wouldn't be a marketing conference if we didn't talk about Kahneman's work, right? I've never read the book. I'm never going to fucking read the book, but I've been to enough marketing conferences. I'm an expert in it now, all right? Come on, we all know it. System 1 and System 2, right? Kahneman's quite kind of honest, right? That System 1, System 2 don't really exist. It's a metaphor, but it's a useful metaphor. So, System 1, shown here in our yellow brain, is basically 90% of our decision making. This is how most decisions are made. Subconsciously, without reflection, speedily, automatically. And in System 2, we did the slow, more conscious decision making that comes out in research. We weight them in our heads, 75% over here and 25% over there. But the reality is we should be reversing those 2 around almost completely. Distinctiveness leads to differentiation. If they don't know it's you, first of all, you can't be differentiated. And if 3/4 of our decisions are actually, or 95% of our decisions are actually happening in System 1, we should think about that as our main challenge in marketing. So, I'd look at it a bit more that way. When you position a brand, it's important. Let's give it an arbitrary 20% number. Positioning what your brand stands for, attempted relative differentiation, sure, 20% of your job. But the 80%, and where you're all probably falling behind, is in codification and being distinctive, okay? Positioning is your brand purpose, your brand personality, whatever you've got written on PowerPoint. Brand codes are the 4 or 5 distinctive assets that make your brand salient and distinctive in the mind of the customer in System 1 processing. And we've forgotten about it because it's not been explicitly our challenge. So, what are codes? Your logo is a code. Yeah, Ehrenberg Bass calls them distinctive assets. A lot of people just call them distinct brand assets now. Your logo is a code, but well-run brands have more than a logo. They have 3 or 4 other distinctive sensual cues that are directly attributed to the brand. Could be a shape, a color, a font, or anything else. About a month ago, Brand Z published an index across a big sample of brands. What were the most distinctive assets in the set? And I don't agree with all of this, but this is it's a helpful total. Your logo is obviously distinctive, and so are shapes and patterns. I've found colors with my clients to be far more distinctive than that, but there you go. Locations and celebrities, less so. Okay? But it gives you an index, right? How distinctive are the different assets you might want to use? So, when you work with a brand, if you know what you're doing, and I can do this, it's in the public realm. I worked on the global brand positioning for Sephora with the CEO, Chris. We came up with a brand position, but we also, because at LVMH we were, for once, well ahead of everyone else, we came up with a palette of 4 codes for Sephora. The logo, the flame, the calpenage, which is a very fucking French way of saying black and white stripes, and a touch of red, yeah? No, Sephora would easily be a $10 billion Australian revenue brand globally. 4 codes, logo plus 3. So you don't want a ton of fucking codes is the first thing. You want to paint the world with your codes. Snickers, interesting case study, weren't distinctive enough. Logo, red parallelogram, the break and stretch, and the Pantone brown. They disagree with me at Snickers, and it's their brand. They say the Pantone isn't a code. I think they're mad, but there you go. Here's the point. The 3 or 4 codes, here's what you do with them, that none of you are doing. You fucking codify everything. Everything. You can't over-codify. You're all too clever. No one notices out there. You spend months, I'll just design the ad, I think the Pantone's wrong, and I think, she could be a little bit older, and we'll just move the position, right? These fuckers don't even know it's you, right? You codify everything. If you look at Sephora, you can't miss us. We codify ads, stores, windows, everything. Because we know that the game is mostly distinctiveness and salience, and then positioning behind it. When you make ads, you're obsessed with detail, yeah? And when we look at how the consumers experience your work, they're usually sleeping through it, yeah? We need to look like ourselves, and that's the #1 challenge. So it's a bit of a conundrum. Why don't you make your work more codified? I'll tell you why. So one of the brands I used to work for was Veuve Clicquot, yeah, the champagne brand. And we did this great brand session at Hôtel du Marc in Champagne, and the CEO's there, and we had this wonderful 3 days together to work on the brand for the next 10 years. And I said to the whole team at the start of the session, what do you each want to do with the brand? What's the one pressing concern you have? And when we went around the room, everyone pretty much said the same thing. I want us to move away from yellow. We're overdoing yellow. Too much yellow. I want it to be more white. And we got to the end of the room, and you're like, you guys are fucking crazy, right? Yellow is the greatest asset in Champagne. You know, you're out with 2 girlfriends on a Saturday night, and you scan a bar, and you're like, well, let's get something. Let's have a drink or something. And you see that yellow label. Clicquot. It jumps at you, right? So how come these very smart executives didn't want to use yellow? And the answer is most of them had worked for that brand, like you, for 10 or 15 or 20 years. They come in each day to their office in Paris. They sit down, they switch on their laptop, and they have a yellow screensaver. And then they get their mouse, which is yellow, on a yellow mouse pad, and they design yellow shit, yeah? And when they go out in the evening, they encounter yellow stuff as well. And after about 8, 9, 15 years of this, people go, I'm fucking sick of yellow, right? And yet, you know something that smart team don't know, which is the 3 times a year you're in a bar, and you see Clicquot yellow, go, let's have a bottle of Clicquot. I took a big lesson from that. You codify the fuck out of everything. And the first lesson, with respect to my agency colleagues, is the agency fucking complaints, yeah? I have a brand I work with in Melbourne. We sent the work back 20 times. 20 times until it was codified enough. Agencies don't like it because it's too obvious. Fuck them. They'll get with the program eventually, right? We're not here to make beautiful ads. We're here to codify. Agencies don't get it. I mean, a few do, but most don't get it. They think it's differentiation. That's not the game. That's not the game. Distinctiveness is the game. Nobody notices your ads. First, they must know that it's you. And if you can find an agency that will give you distinctiveness and then differentiation, hang on to them because they get the practical reality. Yeah? The brand linkage score, it's everything, man. Do they even know that it's you? So what do codes do in my last 5 minutes? And why are they so important? They maintain salience. At Bulgari, we took Serpenti, which is the great code of the house, famous necklace and watch. And for Christmas, we tie it around our buildings now. This stands out way more and is way more distinctive than the Bulgari sign. Yeah? Driving salience, which is our biggest job. If you see it from the customer's point of view, codes do that. We shorten the last 2 feet between preference and purchase. Burger King gets all the international press because Machado and that team are all very clever, but it's wank. It's marketing wank. It's the stuff that gets written about in advertising age. Macca's are a better brand, a better marketed brand, because their stuff isn't as flash. You can't write articles about this. But what DDB have done for that brand until they got fired in America last week is fantastically codified work. Yeah? Suddenly Macca's looks like Macca's again. Advertising linkage. How many people, so Ehrenberg Bass did this brilliant study 2 years ago. If a customer is exposed to 10 TV ads the night before, the next morning she can remember 4 of them even vaguely. And if you ask her of the 4, what was the brand for each of those 4? Again, she can only remember 40% of that, 16%. So the next morning, even if you deliver the ad to these people, 84% of ads are already fucking gone. Wasted money. Creativity, to my earlier point, increases the likelihood she'll remember the ad the next day. Codification drives up the linkage score. Did they know it was your ad in the first place? You cannot over-codify your ads. It is literally impossible. You can use your logo too much, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the other codes that you have available in your pack. You can bolster brand image. Once you have a strong code, you can play with it. When you look at Carlsberg turned their beer red to support Liverpool, who'd won the Champions League, and they've been the sponsor for 25 years, the first thing any Carlsberg fan sees when they see that bottle is green, because they're used to seeing it as being green. When you play with codes, ironically, you enforce codes. And you send a message, which is we're with Liverpool. When Levi's changed their logo with the rainbow colors, 2 things happen. You know it's Levi's more, and you go red. And rightfully, we support the diverse culture behind that rainbow flag. It helps to bolster the brand itself. Brand revitalization. When you've got a really well-established brand, there aren't many, but a few, that's old and dusty, you can twist it. When I used to work with Vuitton in France, we had Murakami, the manga artist, come in, and the famous brief was fuck up monogram, and he created that neon version of monogram. We sold a ton of bags, but more importantly, that's a magic trick. That old monogram, which is 150 years old, has gone from being old and history and heritage and become new and fresh and different. Same when we took L'Etiquette, the shield of Dom Perignon, and we made it neon green. It's old and it's history, but it's new and it's fresh. And, crucially, it's distinctive. I am a huge fan of KFC. KFC were given a tough job by God, right? When your number 1 code is an obese southern gentleman in a white suit who's been dead for 48 years, he's not making it easy on you, right? They have played with that code brilliantly over the last 2 years. You've got to follow what they're doing in the States. It is first-rate work, spectacular. And again, the magic trick. They've got Reba McEntire, who's a female country and western artist, dressed up as the Colonel, right? Playing with codes. It's true, but it's also new. And here's my key point. The thing that we need to think about, I don't believe, and the panel said something different previous, and I respect that very much, I don't think you can do long and short with the same tactics. I don't even think it's possible with the same agencies, practically. I think you have to actually do long-term brand building emotional stuff over here, and then short-term acquisitory entrepreneurial stuff over here. But the key lesson is, if you're going to do that, codes become the bridge between the two. And so when I build this brand and these mental connections over here, I can activate them in the short-term stuff instantly because the codification is linking the long and the short together. So do more codes give you more success? We didn't measure it, so I can't fucking tell you. Okay, 2 more and I'm going to finish. I've got 4 seconds. I'm going to go 1 minute over. That's it. Do more channels equal more effectiveness? Short answer, yes. You know the answer to that question, digital versus traditional? Facebook versus TV? You know what the answer is? Yes. Yes. I'll have them all. They're just fucking channels. Use them all. That backs up the work of analytic partners who found the same thing, but with a less cool chart, and explains KFC. Final one, I'll end with this is beauty. Agency marriage, you ready? For the agency and client partners in the room. Every agency wants a long-term marriage, right? Ideally 50 years, total loyalty, don't work with anyone else, come to the Christmas party. That's what gives you the best work. So, does having a single partner agency in a long-term trusting marriage, does that produce the most effectiveness? And our survey says, does it fuck? You actually want 2 or 3 partner agencies. The right metaphor for agency-client reactions isn't a long-term marriage. It's more of a threesome, foursome type arrangement, okay? We haven't got time for that video. And we'll end in style. The one interesting thing we learned from all of this data, the one biggest driver of effectiveness was bravery. So if you look at what drives the most effect, it's how brave was the campaign. How gutsy was it? How many risks did it take? Again, back to this point about nobody notices you, yeah? You've really got to push it. And I'm talking real bravery. I'm not talking George Columbalis being upset and apologetic. I'm not even talking Ned Kelly brave, right? I'm talking fucking Mel Gibson mental Braveheart brave, yeah? Taking chances, partly because we'll all be dead soon, but also because fortune favors with effectiveness the campaigns that go for it. Think about the Heart Foundation and that work that was done. That was brave stuff, right? Fortune favors those campaigns. Go for it. Because going for it is the biggest driver of effectiveness of all. And we are quite brave in Australia. So, lessons in effectiveness, evidence-based. Spend time on diagnosis. 2 or 3 strategic objectives overall is kind of the magic number. Long and short, yeah? Long and short together in that 60-40 arrangement. Mass and targeted, that's the new one, along with long and short. I believe they go together, and they should go together in a 2-speed brand plan. Aim for differentiation, relative differentiation. The Australian is perceived to be more authoritative than the Sydney Morning Herald, let's say. I don't know the data, okay? But neither of them owns authoritative. But we are going to try and own that asset relative to them. But, key point, roughly 20% of your time on differentiation and positioning, 80% on distinctiveness and codes and looking like yourself. The 4 big banks are closing branches right now. None of them have thought about the impact that will have on their distinctiveness. They have literally a distinctive corner of every street, not for much longer, right? And that's a massive issue for them because I believe their distinctiveness is going to fall away. Amazing creativity. Choose your agency on the ability to do amazing creative work. It's still understated. And as many channels as you can effectively invest in, the more the merrier. Maybe that's unduplicated reach. Maybe there's a synergy in 360. We honestly don't know. But there appears to be, from all the data, as you add channels, even as you control for budget, you appear to get more and more effectiveness. And ideally, 2 or maybe even 3 lead agencies integrated by the client, and at the heart of it all, courage to take risks and to go for it, the biggest driver of effectiveness of all. Thank you very much.